Hello, it's the last day of February, so time for my February wrap-up. These are some of the books that I've read, and altogether I've read 12, so it's been a really good month. And to say that's the shortest month, well, I did really well. I started off with one of my Christmas books. I've been working my way through the books I was given for Christmas. And this was Between Two Fires by Beuhlman. And it was totally out of my comfort zone. I wasn't sure what I was going to be reading because it's dark fantasy horror, and that is just not something that I normally read. But I found that it was very good. The characterizations were excellent. The horror scenes were totally grotesque. It's very cinematic. So you could imagine this being made into a film. And it's all to do with a knight, a priest and a young girl travelling across medieval France during the plague because she knows that she's got to get to Avignon, and it's all to do with the battle of good and evil. So really good one that was, and it was a total surprise. The second one I read was a NetGalley book called Shadow Girls by Birch, and this was almost a sort of coming of age book. It's sort of with supernatural ghostly vibes. It starts off in 1960s Manchester, and we are in a school with 15-year-old Sally and her friend Pamela, and you've got bullying, you've got all the things that teenage girls in the 1960s got up to. And when we go back to the same school years later, it's now been turned into a block of flats, we find that the tragedy that affected Sally back in the 60s is still there, and we've got sort of supernatural ghostly vibes as well. So that, I enjoyed that one. The next one was one of my 5 stars, and it was another Christmas present. It was Piranesi, and this was fantastic. Magical world building. You've got magical rooms, you've got the ocean in the house, you've got constellations in the house, you've got a character who is so innocent in his curiosity because he believes he's the beloved child of the house and the house will provide everything for him. And it was just incredible. Absolutely loved this one. Really, really did. Then we move on to another NetGalley book, and this was Witches by Brenda Lozano. And this is set in Mexico, and we've got 2 points of view. We've got Feliciana, who's a healer in Mexico, and we've got Zoe, who's a journalist, who goes to interview Feliciana. And although it's called Witches, it turns into a conversation between the 2 women, and you see the links between them and how their histories are almost identical. So that was another good one. Then we go to Greek myth retelling, and this was Cassandra by Christa. And I'd never come across a book purely about Cassandra before, and it's almost a stream of consciousness because there's not a single chapter break in here. And she's telling us the story of her life, and she flits backwards and forwards, and you sort of have the time before the war, during the war and after the war, and you've got so many layers of characters and different perspective on that time period than I was expecting. And again, excellent. I love my Greek retellings. And so much so that my next one from NetGalley was Elektra by Jennifer Saint. And this was her second novel after Ariadne. And I found this one so much better than Ariadne. I loved the characterizations. I loved getting into under the skin of Elektra and Clytemnestra and Cassandra, because we meet Cassandra again in this book. And I loved it. Absolutely. It was a 5-star again. And I'd love to get a real copy when it comes out. Next one was also a NetGalley one, and it's called The Island of Forgetting by Jasmine Seeley, and it's her debut novel. And you've got Greek links again, because although it's not a Greek retelling, it's set in Barbados, she uses the character traits of the gods in the characters that she's building. And you have a family full of secrets, and you've got Kronos and Atlas and Calypso. You've got these characters in Barbados, and you've got the traits of the Greek gods in their characterizations. Super retelling, brilliantly innovative. Then I moved on to a novel in verse. Here is The Beehive by Sarah Crossan. I love verse novels that are in verse because I find that the emotions are heightened. Because they are reducing the words, each word is so much more powerful, if you see what I mean. And it's to do with grief and loss. It's to do with how do you share your grief if no one knows about it. Because Anna has been having an affair with Connor, and Connor dies, and because nobody knew about the affair, she's got no shoulder to cry on. And it's all to do with her grief. Lovely book. Then I moved on to another Greek retelling, The Women of Troy, which is the second novel of Pat Barker's. I think it's going to be a trilogy. This follows on from The Silence of the Girls, and we've got Briseis again. And this time we are in the almost limbo while the ships are waiting to leave Troy. They can't leave Troy because there's no fair wind to let them go. And it's the story of what happens during that time. It's the story of Priam's burial, unburial. It's the story of Briseis. And you've got all the women in this, and it's a story of the women and how they are coping with just sitting there waiting to have their new lives in Greece. Then the final two, I've started reading, no, it's not the final two. I've started reading the Carnegie Medal long list because I do like the young adult books. So I've picked up two from the long list, and next month you'll see that I'm reading even more of them. We Are the Wolves by Jason Cockcroft, and this is a story of John and his son. It's told through the point of view of his son, who is unnamed throughout, and it's the relationship between John and his son, and it's very tense. There are supernatural elements in there, and it's beautifully illustrated throughout. You've got sort of atmospheric drawings that add to the atmosphere, and you've got a little bit of supernatural with ancient legends, and you've got tension towards the end as the boy, the son, finds himself alone. Excellent. And this one, When the Sky Falls by Earle, set in 1941 in the Blitz. We've got Joseph, who, rather than being evacuated from the city to the countryside, has come from the countryside to the city because his gran can't cope with him. And he goes to live with Mrs. F, who runs a zoo. She's got very few animals left in the zoo. She's got a couple of camels, a couple of wolves, and Adonis, a silverback ape. And it's the story of beginning to trust because Joseph is so full of anger. And it is heartbreaking. It really is. The final book was another NetGalley book, and it was, again, young adult, and it's called Hotel Magnifique by Emily J. Taylor. And it is the story of Yanni and her sister Zosa, who go to work in the Hotel Magnifique, which is a legendary hotel, a magical hotel. It appears, gets its guests, and then every midnight it moves to a different location. It's full of magic, it's full of mystery, but as Johnny discovers, it's also full of dangerous secrets. Some of these I haven't yet done my videos for, so you'll have to watch out for them. I've not had a chance to do the videos before I've done the wrap up. But I've had a really excellent month, and my book of the month, I'm torn between Elektra and Piranesi. So they're both sort of, I gave them both 5 stars. I'm torn between which to choose as my book of the month, but I think I'm going to go with Piranesi, because it is just such magical world building, and I absolutely loved it. So that was February. Let's see what March brings. So have a lovely month. Have a happy reading. Take care, and bye.